see just how ginormous it is, okay? Since this is being recorded, we have to make sure the sound is, especially as people talk, just make sure you're within earshot of the mics, because that way, when the YouTube video goes viral of this meeting, people are going to want to hear what you have to say, all right? So we have the giant maps in the back. We've got 7 maps. I don't want them, they're in my cubicle. Imagine me trying to even like work. I've got these giant maps looming over me. So they need to, they're all Utah. I didn't get any of Colorado or,
no, I mean, United States.
I know. But you do raise a great point, which is that once we have a plan for how to think about getting the maps out and being used in as far as Utah, then we can think about whether we want a U.S. or world maps as well. So we'll see, okay? So when you kind of think about that today, kind of brainstorm ideas about how to best use them. There is an amazing new online professional learning resource that I want to share with you that out of, I think it's out of the University of Michigan at this link. It's amazing when you start drilling down into what they've got available for people. I want to talk about the instructional materials review process and possibly a little bit a piece there about OER along with it. I've been doing some work with community members regarding Holocaust education, and I want to make sure you hear more about that. And as a matter of fact, Brian, we're going to want to get those books from your cubicle into the hands of people here. So at some point, yeah, just bring a few over, and people can, you know, as I start trailing off, they can start looking at the book instead. Okay. Scott Bassett from the Topaz Museum is going to be here to talk about some grant opportunities. They have some funding resources for field trips to Topaz and materials to request for teachers. So he wants to talk with you about the best way to get that information out to schools, but also how to kind of make selections about who should go and how that process is going to work. There's a survey of needs that he has developed that he's going to have you look at as well through SurveyMonkey. Okay, then we'll switch to the secondary focus. We're going to talk a little bit about History 1700. How many people here are aware or have a History 1700 concurrent enrollment course in your district? Okay, so we're going to talk about that because it's kind of a complicated course, and we don't give core credit unless it meets certain requirements, and we'll talk about some desires on the part of early college staff here to have us rethink 1700. Okay. The Nugget courses, we have 17 Nugget courses. Those are tiny little 1-month-long courses the teachers can take, and they are just about ready to rock and roll, finally, through USBE. So that'll be, these are courses on a whole range of topics, and I'll, if I can link to them, I will. And then we also have, you get 1 USBE credit for each, okay? And we'll see how that goes. And if it's just a guinea pig, and if it becomes too much, or there's no way for me to kind of keep responding to the emails or questions, then we may have to rethink just creating them as self-sustaining kind of like relationship courses instead. And then, I don't know, we'll see. But it's just, we're gonna see what we can.
At this point, can they be used to get the social studies deposit endorsement?
They can't be used for the endorsement. And that's another thing that's going to be like complicating. We have to make sure we communicate that clearly to people. There are Nugget courses and there are endorsement courses. The online courses are 3-semester-hour courses that some of you have taught in here. And those are different. Those are through SUU. They are usually 12 weeks long, and they help people earn their endorsements. We have 7 of them kicking off next week. So if your teachers are not aware of that as an option, please let them know about it. We're going to have a great geography update from Desi, who's joined us in the back. Desi, welcome, from Salt Lake District regarding geo-inquiry. I'll talk about an essay contest. Adobe has some amazing new suite of resources available for all teachers. And who here is familiar with what they have available? Okay. It's amazing. I sent you a link yesterday about that. Just the one course that I just dug into on, a little course on how to make a 60-second documentary. That would be, I think you all have access now to Photoshop. You all have access to Premiere Pro, which is a film editing. You have so much access through this license that the state has paid for you and for students, and a lot of people don't even know, right? And so now if we're going to go back and try to get more money at the legislature to continue the funding for a program where thousands of teachers may or may not even be aware that they have the rights to this program, let alone how they would use it in their classroom, we've got to spread the word. So we're going to do that today. There's a census coming up next year, folks. So we have to talk about what responsibility or opportunities do we have regarding the census. Who here knows what UTOPS is? What is it?
It's a conference for psychology teachers.
Okay. So Utah Teachers of Psychology in Secondary Schools is UTOPS. All right? And it's awesome. So if you've got psychology teachers who are not aware of UTOPS, they need to be. November 15th is the conference they hold. What's Better Days 2020?
Celebration of women's suffrage.
That's right. Not women suffering. No. Oh, yeah, that's right. Right?
That too.
Yeah, that too. Right. So suffrage, the 150th anniversary of the first actual votes cast by women legally in Utah were Valentine's Day, 1870. So February 14th of next year will be the 150th anniversary. There's going to be quite a lot of work around that, but there's also incredible work being done, and Naomi Watkins will be here to talk about that a little bit. And we have to talk about how do we measure and assess civic engagement, and we have there's some rumblings and some good work being done at the legislative level regarding civics, education, and thinking about and adjusting the requirement of the civics test as a high school graduation requirement. Don't all suddenly be sad about the prospect of the civics test going away. It's probably not going to go away. It's just that there are possible other options. And we need to talk about that because we have to figure out how workable other options would be. Because the civics test that we have in the state is kind of like the path of least resistance, right? In terms of I want something that says we did something about civics, but we didn't really do anything about civics, in terms of it's not an assessment of civic engagement. It's about what you know, okay? And so there are other and different approaches, including one coming out of California that was just recently passed, that is a civic seal of excellence. So the seal attaches to your diploma, and students would do something that would fall under this rubric of attending zoning meetings or working as an intern with their legislator or doing some kind of civic action and civic work that checks off that box and that is equivalent to or better than or more rigorous than the civics test. And that legislation is going to come down the pike, and you're going to have to then make it happen or not at your district level. So you need to be aware of it and in on the conversation. So we'll talk about that. Okay. So anything else you want to add? I thought I don't know, just a few things to talk about today, right? Other pressing issues before we kick in? Anything else we need to know about or add? Social studies wise. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the elementary standards review process. So the timeline, I've just got these links here. You can go there if you want. I'll go to the process piece in a second. The timeline is important for you and important for people who are participating in the WebEx if you're not here, to kind of plan out, not just, because some of you are not just responsible for social studies, but you might be responsible for other curricular areas. There is now a timeline of when each set of standards will be looked at and reviewed, okay? You know, trying to make that more of a coherent schedule so that you're not constantly caught off guard, okay? Let me just see if I can, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, I can trust that. All right, so you can see right at the top, social studies K6 is in the mix. Now here's what we've done. Where do you see social studies again? And you can kind of see these screens are, I don't know if this is big enough, but there's also screens here and here. So do you see where it shows up again? It shows up again right here. Okay, but here, instead of it being social studies K6, it'll be social studies K12. So the idea is that in 2026, we would just look again at K12 standards and think about that holistically, okay? So this kind of lays out how things are going on. So 2026, 2027, looking at and thinking about revision, I think if I work my way backwards. Okay, so I will be retiring right here, and some of you will be doing this, okay? So just so you know, all right? You think I'm joking? All right, so here's the process. Welcome to my world, right? Okay, so this is important for you to kind of know and see where we are and what happens first. So in the August board meeting, I presented a memo to the board saying we'd like to look at pulling a standards review committee of people together to look at the standards. So then that requires 7 members to be recommended and selected by the board chair, and that includes some of the people here, and some classroom teachers and university professors. Okay, so I have my 7, and that's a standards review committee. But that's not all. Who else is on the standards review committee? Anybody know? By statute, it's also 5 parents selected by the Speaker of the House and 5 parents selected by the President of the Senate. So the process is interesting and political and civic from the get-go, okay? So, which is fine. It's like public, here's the process. So that's what will happen.
Robert?
Yes?
Do people apply to be part of that, or do they just choose people they know? How do they choose people?
Good question. Don't know. There's no, like, requirement that I'm aware of for how the President of the Senate or the Speaker of the House does that. It's their prerogative, I believe. Okay. Then that group meets. That group meets twice. It meets, it looks at the standards, it thinks about it for a while, it comes together again and meets and makes recommendations about what they think should be done with the elementary standards. Review them, revise, maybe don't do anything. Maybe they're just fine, whatever. They make those recommendations to the board, and then you'll see that the Standards Review Committee makes the recommendations to the board, and if the full board says move forward, then a writing committee is pulled together. So there's a Standards Review Committee that's totally different, possibly, than the writing committee. There might be some people that are on the Standards Review Committee who, that's all they do. 2 meetings, they're done. But others might then also be on the writing team, okay, to do the actual writing. So this just kind of lays out the timeline. It's just a march through month after month of reporting and work and reporting and work to make the process as transparent as possible. There will be basically every couple months a report from me about status, how things are going. So the red lines here kind of give you an example of the estimated best case scenario, how long this will take. Okay. So that's that. But I just want you to be aware of that. That's the process. Okay. Sometimes it has 12 steps. Sometimes it has more. That's where we're at. Okay. Yep.
How's the K2 newer than 3.6? So we'll go get for review as well?
Yeah, there's not going to be a separation of the K2 and it's actually I think it's, K2 are a little bit newer, but they're, it just doesn't make sense, I don't think, to not just look at all of K6, right? So that's what the board has chosen as well. So any response before we move on to that bit of information? Okay. So I'm hoping that we'll just be able to focus on what's essential in K6. I mean, the critical thing for us is, this is where I really need to hear what your teachers are saying about how they can teach social studies and incorporate social studies in their elementary grades. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure to kind of reduce and reduce and reduce because people have to think about fitting everything in, okay? But we can't reduce to the point where it's just kind of a skill set to support literacy, for example. You know, there's real stuff that is essential. Knowledge. You all think about your elementary grades. Is there content that you remember from your early elementary grades in social studies? If you think back, for me, I mean, there were so many like drawings I made of Puebloan culture. I learned about Pompeii when I was in 3rd grade. I wanted to go to Pompeii ever since I was in 3rd grade. You know, I finally went 2 years ago. It was like I knew where Italy was. I knew that there was 79 AD. I knew timelines. I knew because I got content. And I got rarer words that were essential to kind of understand how the world works. And what we know is that, and what both of these resources here talk about is just how important social studies content is, especially to students who are underserved. So I think I've talked about the baseball study, right? There's a literacy study specifically focusing on baseball knowledge. Does that ring a bell with people? It's important. I think it helps people kind of get the importance of social studies if you think about it from this standpoint. If you have a set of low readers and you have a set of high readers when they engage in a text, okay? And Sam Weinberg talks about this when he does like Traxoline, and he talks about this, the idea that people can kind of answer questions about Traxoline, decoding the text, but they still don't know what the heck it's talking about. That there's something deeper in that. In this case, it's baseball. And what they discovered was that low readers who knew a lot about baseball, when they confronted a difficult text about baseball, did better at comprehending the text than the high readers who didn't know anything about baseball. Does that make sense? That if we're teaching kids more about the world, if we're teaching students about the content, then when they engage in text, even if they're low readers, they're still going to have scaffolding to make sense out of that reading. It's going to it's going to push them at levels that will make sense to them. It's why we want to make sure we've got inclusive texts, for example, that they're reading in the classrooms. That if students have a frame of reference that is not just white middle class readings, that has a huge impact in terms of their ability to push themselves into deeper and more complex texts. And it makes sense. It's a gut sense, but it's also backed up in the studies, okay? So Nell Duke talks about this at this, and what we've got here with this video, it's like 15 minutes long, and I think we've got a 10-minute video as well. There are also study questions. I mean, this is something where you could use this video or encourage elementary teachers to just have the conversation of watching the video, answering the questions, and thinking about this as a resource in a PLC or in a team to think about how it is that we have managed to muck this up so badly, okay? Social studies ought to be happening every day in elementary classrooms, and it's not. It's not. And Pam, you've been working for years with elementary teachers in your district, and yet you're still skimming the surface, right? In terms of the numbers of teachers out there who are even really devoted to elementary social studies education, who are being told by principals or others that they need to cut that stuff out, right? Well, these are arguments for why that's the absolute wrong approach, okay? And how we have a moral obligation, honestly, to figure out how to work with these students. So here's the Atlantic article. It's basically, fundamentally talking about you got to teach about stuff, okay? Okay? It starts with this anecdote about this student who's drawing clowns. And she's like, why are you drawing clowns? Because it says to draw clowns. And what it said is draw conclusions from the text. But, you know, we're asking kids to do all of this really rich cognitive work around literacy skills that we're challenging kids with, and she's drawing clowns because she doesn't even understand that concept, let alone the content. You can't draw conclusions from stuff if you don't get it. You might as well draw clowns, you know? It's more fun. So it's a really great article. It specifically talks here about the baseball study and gives you the citations for you. It's not very long. It again could be, I think, a really useful link to send out just to have teachers kind of think about. What I don't want, and maybe this is something for principals to look at as well, rather than just teachers. I don't want teachers to feel beat up about the fact that what we're saying here is we're not doing this stuff as fully as we need to be. But it's one more example of kind of the marginalization of social studies that I shared you with that infographic. Okay. All right, so thoughts? This is not library media. This is social studies. Well, you can do that, but yes.
This might be premature, but I was at the conference of the ASLH last week, which met in Philadelphia. That's the American Association for State and Local History. And I'm part of a committee working on planning for the 75th centennial of the American Revolution. And one of the people in our group is from the NCSS. We were talking about these issues in relation to how we want to use that commemoration as a springboard to, really have some bold goals for history education. And NCSS is developing some talking points about reclaiming classroom time for social studies, and the target is 45 minutes a day. I don't know if you guys have heard this coming down through that organization, but I think if you're thinking about standard time for elementary, that's a great number to have in mind. That's pretty bold to me.
Right. It's the interesting thing is that there are those literacy blocks of time, right, that are just set apart. And while literacy is critical, it's the amount of time is not necessarily sacred either in terms of does it have to be a 3-hour block when it could be a 2-hour and 15-minute block, so that there's actually a 45-minute allocation to really robust social studies instruction. I mean, that's the idea. Part of it is talking with elementary teachers about the absolute structure of the day, right? There's not a minute to waste with students. There's got to be a sense of urgency on the part of every elementary teacher. You have that third grader, all those third graders in your classroom for 180 days, and you want to get them from here to there. What's it going to take to make it happen? Okay.
Elementary teachers are not complaining about that. They're complaining about math reteaching is what's taking their time for social studies.
So math reteaching. What else? I mean,
it's harder to integrate that way.
It's hard to get social studies integrated through math, right? Other people hearing that in terms of math reteaching? And is that because the kids are just not where they need to be for the assessments? Is that what's driving that? I mean, is that what you're seeing?
I guess.
Possibly that's driving it, but that's not necessarily the case. We have teachers who say, my kids don't need reteaching, we don't need this block of time.
Yeah, I hear that as well.
That we've got plenty of time to teach math, and my data does not show that my students need this other block of time.
So what do they do then? I mean, if they're saying that they don't...
They do it anyway because it's mandated.
Okay. Yeah.
There's something along that line because when principals request schedules from teachers, what they usually are looking for is they are looking specifically for math blocks and for literacy blocks to make sure those things are. And so I'm not sure that that's a priority already at the school level, like at every school level. I know at some school levels that it's important, but I mean, the principals are checking that for that as well when their teachers give them their daily schedules.
I think you're absolutely right. In fact, we have principals who say, you don't have time to teach this much social studies. You've got to teach literacy, you've got to teach literacy. So in many cases, it's coming from our administration.
And not all.
Right, not all.
Right. Do a lot of schools have the capability? I mean, in most elementary schools, are you seeing teachers being able to craft their own day and submit that? Here's my plan for the day, or what? Or is that?
Pretty much structured for them.
That's
true. Yeah, but on a weekly basis, I know that teachers teach what they want to teach. They'll find time for it. If their passion is science or if their passion is social studies, it will get taught.
Well, my big push is a lot of our schools use elementary use a basic literacy program, Reading Street, and trying to get teachers to understand that it's, and principals, probably more important principals, but to understand, hey, there's a wealth of social studies articles and little readings in this program that are social studies based. Provide the few minutes to take that a step deeper. I was working with one team and they were reading an article about ghost towns in California. And I said, well, why are we using this article that's focused on ghost towns in California? Let's take 30 seconds and have them read a second article about ghost towns in Utah or like down in Eureka or even old mining towns of Alta. And all of a sudden it made their lesson more local and kids got excited about it. Oh, I've skied in Alta before. And all of a sudden the kids were talking about ghost towns in an exciting way and just saying, hey, it's okay to build social studies lessons within the parameters of your Reading Street basal requirements.
So do we have a systematic? I mean, is that something that at the district level then you would? Do we need to figure out how to support teachers in doing that? I mean, what's the?
That's what I'm attempting to do in small ways, but it's a tough fight.
Well, we've even done that at the state level before by trying to say, here's basic readers, there's only 4 or 5 of them, right? But every time we do that, they adopt a new one or there's a revision and we do that process again. It's kind of challenging. It's a lot of work.
Robert, you know what would really help us is at the curriculum directors meeting at the state level, if they would talk about time to teach social studies and value of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've certainly done that before, and we can certainly do it again. I guess the question is that we all know it's important, but it still doesn't happen. I mean, it's like what's the linchpin? You know, what's the stop? You know. I mean, the analogy would be that I used to get, Representative LeVar Christensen used to talk to me quite a bit about civics and civic education, about how important civic education was and how it's the central mission of public education. And he would say, you need to have the principals make that announcement at the beginning of the school year. They need to talk about how important civic education is. I'm like, yeah. And people will say, yeah, that's important, and then they'll go back to what they're doing. It's the same thing with, I mean, we can go to the curriculum directors and say, this is important, here's the study, here's the baseball study, here's this, but we've also got to have a plan, you know? Jess?
One of the things I've done in my district is align the baseball with the social studies standards, and that seems to help, and then give explicit in PD on what that looks like in the classroom when you're extending social studies in your literacy block. I find that we can't really compete with literacy or math, and nor should we, right? But we have a fixed amount of time during the day. And so how in elementary can we, use social studies as the text to build the context and the background knowledge of students while building the literacy, alongside the basics for those teachers who need it. I find that elementary teachers want to teach social studies, that those who are like social studies, maybe studied history or geography or whatever, feel confident. But then there are elementary teachers, they're generalists, right? So some aren't comfortable with how do you teach social studies outside of the way I learned it. And so they really appreciate that explicit PD on how you do that and what that looks like in the classroom.
Can I ask you what it looks like in public? Do you have a basal?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like? The basal we have, and I looked specifically at fourth and fifth grade, that the readings in there, they're not even close to the topics that we cover most. So I don't know.
So I'm not getting from the basal, but teachers are, right? So they aligned and made cross connections to wonders, and it's not week one, standard one, right? It's kind of all over, right? So, but teachers, I got a committee of teachers together to do that.
So I'm sorry. So the problem that I had when we tried to do this was that, for instance, in fifth grade, there's a story about, a reading about exploring Mars. And we thought that we might talk about the issue of exploration when we read that book, that reading. However, that had a much higher reading level than the ones found at the beginning of the Journeys book. And so the students, when they were studying exploration, if you did it chronologically, the students weren't ready for that reading level yet.
But the social studies standards don't necessarily have to be taught.
Right.
They're taught thematically.
Right. So, but we thought exploration, if we start talking about exploration and colonization at the beginning of the year, that makes sense. But the readings that we wanted to use for that could not be used at the beginning of the year.
So one of the things we did, our teachers, again, I didn't teach elementary, so I'm not as familiar with the elementary resources that are out there and stories and things like that, right? But they do, right? So they have this really rich conversation around how to navigate around those kinds of challenges that they come up with and things like that, right? But it's just getting that conversation started that's important, and then they can kind of navigate that in their PLCs. Because certainly I can't meet with them as often as I'd like to, or as often as they'd even like to get together. But in their PLCs, once you get those conversations going, they can continue them.
How many of you have standalone social studies curriculum materials in like third grade or fifth grade? Like texts and so you've got resources there other than the basal, because we talk a lot about the basal, and we're trying to work with the basal, and the George Washington Carver one week, and George Washington the next week is in the basal, so we try to teach. But what about, if we're talking about 45 minutes for social studies, is there a point where people say, okay, let's grab our social studies book, or let's grab our maps, or our globes, or whatever, or our Scholastic Weekly,
Some schools have them.
Do some schools, if they have them, are they teaching social studies more than other schools? Do we have any, do we know? Do we have any data on that?
Data. Our district is in that process with elementary, and they're saying, here's where we struggle. So we're putting together resources and going district-wide to say, here they are, now use them, and let us know how they're going, and we'll help you update them.
Corey, will you grab that mic and just turn it on? Press the button, turn it on, make sure.
It's piece by piece, standard by standard, and we'll get there. But I don't see our district ever saying, okay, we'll go buy materials for readers. Maybe.
Okay. Jesse, you were nodding your head. Do you have some schools that have like a, fifth grade? Utah. Gibbs Smith has the Utah textbook for fourth grade. How many do you guys have that across the board? If that's the reality across the board, then you would think that there would be at least a lot more social studies instruction occurring in the fourth grade. Is there?
No, and a big part of it is that our teachers don't know the fourth grade content. They don't know Utah history.
Well, read a chapter ahead in the textbook.
Right, that's logical, but that's not.
personally for my own fourth grader, who just went through fourth grade last year, had 2 assignments the entire school year. That was the only 2 that were listed on her report card. 2 social studies assignments.
And what, do you remember what they were? Was it like name the counties? I mean, I just don't even know. Do I want to know?
Not even that, to be honest with you. I was kind of really disgusted with that. And this is the fourth grade teacher that taught social studies to all of the fourth grade, because they do that little pull out and share, type of situation, and it's just not happening. It's just not happening.
Well, you're not saying anything new. It's just that we've got to, I mean, and, I don't want to belabor this, but it's like we have got to, if we can't figure this out, how are we supposed to, how are we supposed to expect that a principal who's got a million things on their plate is going to figure it out for us?
Well, I was just going to say that the state came up with new standards on educational leadership for 2019, and one of those standards, the last one, is really focused on social studies. And if principals can, when they get this and they start having to live by it and get evaluated based off of it, if they know that their social studies is being taught and it's being met, then it would help them. But it says to promote the preparation of students to live productively and positively contribute to society, including participation in representative government and other civic processes. So that's all about.
And it's all about, the state board's mission says we need to have students engage civically. It's one of the essential components of the State Board of Education's mission. And yet, how can you do that if you're not learning about Pompeii, for crying out loud? It's just, you got to know this stuff. Well, I would, if you feel like professional learning is something that teachers need, do they need professional development about how to use materials you've already purchased, then that is something that we could provide at the state level as well. Thinking together about how do we help teachers see. They're the bottom line. They're the fundamental decision makers in their classroom about what gets taught. I know that they are. All I know is that there are teachers out there who, even though the principal says X about you can't teach social studies or you quit devoting so much time to it, there's still people who figure it out and do it subversively if they have to, like subversive civic education, heaven forbid, right? Okay. Maybe it's just that we have these incredible programs like History Day. We just keep making inroads through things like History Day to say this is how you can do it. This is how you can incorporate it. The kinds of skills that kids are developing are incredible in social studies. I'm going to show you this link really quick so you can see what is available here. These are high leverage practices regarding effective instruction. Okay, these are they've broken it down. These are specific things that if kids do them well, these make a difference in terms of learning. Look at the first one on the left. If that's not social studies, I don't know what it is. In terms of learning how to have conversations, leading a discussion, okay? When we've got down here, it's broken into, in particular, into subject areas. And it's got social studies included, okay? And so these are the kinds of things that students, if they're doing, can be super important, right? So we're going to just, if we talk about leading a discussion and going in to lead a discussion, it talks about what is leading the discussion. What does it mean in social studies? How can leading a group discussion advance justice? This concept of democracy. Why work on leading? What's the role? How do we represent this for kids? And then there are all of these video resources, okay? all of these embedded, possible, step-by-step, scaffolded approaches for what that looks like. If you're a new teacher, what do you need? Okay, so that's just that one, right, for that resource. I think it could be really powerful with PLCs. It could be really powerful just in a class, just for a regular teacher, you know. Just making a list of these things make a difference. Spelling tests don't make a difference. Don't waste your time on a spelling test. Okay? Word study, yes. Spelling test, no. Round robin reading, no. If we're going to all round robin read our article, by the time it gets to Wendy, she's going to have known that she's the 8th paragraph. So she's been practicing paragraph 8 for the last 5 minutes. She hasn't even been listening to anything else. And yet we still do things that don't make any difference. These things do make a difference. Okay? So this is a cool resource. You've got the link there from Teaching Works. Okay? All right. Let's talk about the maps, because the maps might be a way to teach social studies in elementary grades. I don't know, 4th grade. Here's the big map. Okay? I've got 7 giant maps. I've also got stuff downstairs like chains, so you can do legislative districts, or you can show the routes of rivers, and we've got cones that you can use to show population centers, and all this stuff will be in a bin, and then you've got this giant map that can be in another bin, and we got like 30 pairs of socks. So the kids can put socks on so they can walk on the map and not muck the map up too much, okay? So, ta-da, there it is, great. So what? How are we going to get it out there, okay? Because they're in my cubicle right now, and they need to go away.
I'll take one.
Great. Okay?
I'll take one.
Now,
we had National Geographic come in start of August.
Right.
PD for us. They talked about the giant maps, of course, and have about 10 teachers bugging me on a weekly basis.
There it is. Okay, great. So we've got stuff, and we got the map. And what I need, here's what I need. I don't want to make this too bureaucratic, okay? It's like, I got the maps, I got the stuff, you got the teachers who want to use it. Here's all I'm going to ask is that you just let me know that they're being used, okay? So I'm just going to like put a Google form together or something where you can just like you can build an evaluation in, like what'd you learn, what else do you need, how else can you make it better? We'll get I have money that I can spend to help with Megan Osborne and other people who could develop some curriculum. There are already lessons. There are even lessons that at the secondary level could be useful in a geography class regarding redistricting, or in U.S. government and citizenship, you could use the class for some of the questions about water or whatever. Okay, you can see from the map that you cannot just put it in your classroom. Okay, because there's no way. You could use it as a tent, I guess, as a tarp. You could everybody could be under it. But what it needs to do is go into you've got to book the gym or some space, or take it outside on a nice day. I don't know. Probably not. Probably just go to the gym. So I'm just trying to think about grass on it. Okay. And then use it. And as long as people use it, then you can keep it. Okay. And if you're not using it, then you got to bring it back.
So can I take one today?
Yes. Let's take one today. Okay. And then your teachers can be happy, and we'll get you the stuff, and we'll. The issue is there are lessons that we need to kind of help find for you. I mean, it's one thing to just have the map. It's another thing to actually do something cognitively rich with it. Okay, but we can help you figure that out. Okay, I'd rather that you have it and take some of this. Let's see if we can get some of this stuff from downstairs, and then we can figure out curriculum to go with it. Okay.
Robert?
There's a lot of lessons that have been developed for these where it's just like, the lesson is Iowa, and the nice thing about Iowa has 4 letters. You take that out, you type in Utah, and some of the lessons will still work, Find even if we're talking about like simple map skills, about how to use a key and find different identifying features on a map, that's great. Okay.
Robert,
Yes.
this is Neil Peacock at Emory. I had mentioned before that the possibility of maybe using the service centers to get these maps into the hands of rural teachers. Is that a possibility?
It is. Neil, why don't you just email me afterwards with your contact at the service center that would make sense, and we'll talk with them too.
Okay, great. I'll do that. Thank you.
Yep, great. Thanks. It's kind of nice to have the voice of Neil, just kind of disembodied voice. You've lost. Okay.
It's better to just have my voice than have to look at me, actually.
Well, you know, we'll agree to disagree on that.
So, Robert, what will your checkout process be? I mean, will you give it to a district for a certain amount of time, or?
I think we have 7 right now. It's gonna be, if a district is using it, then we're gonna let you keep using it. And if we need to get more, then we'll talk about getting more. The thing is that if we can encourage the district to see that it's useful and make the purchase, that's great. But if it's going to require me to make the purchase and loan them out and get the PD going, then I'm going to do that. Okay? So, hey, welcome. Don't be sorry. No, you didn't. You came in the right door. Have a seat. You're welcome. So, nice to see you. All right, so giant maps. Again, we can certainly have some kind of more rigid plan if we need it, but I don't want it. I'd rather just say, use them, let me know that you're using them. If you're not using them, we'll bring them back, okay?
I've actually talked to a couple of high school principals, because high schools seem to have their own money sources in their elementary. I have a couple of high school principals who might buy a map set for their feeder system, so we can keep it within the feeder and use it up to them.
That'd be great. They're like $700.
But I want to get one used and show principals what's possible with it.
Right. Yep. No, that's great. And who knows, Chris, maybe there will be 3 social studies lessons next year instead of 2, right?
I've already got ideas.
A 50% increase in social studies instruction in the 4th grade in your school district.
Well, and for Neil's benefit, I can bring one down with us, get it to the service center.
Right.
You know,
Awesome.
Being in Carver. So.
Yep. That's great.
Hey, that would be great. Robert, I also mentioned that it would be wonderful to set one of these up at the Rural Schools Conference. This next year in July, it's going to be in Richfield. And if we could get the space, if they could give us the space and set it up and let, we had nearly 1,000 teachers at the last Rural Schools Conference, and let them see this.
Yeah, that's great. No, I think that, yeah, and Pam's just, she's side talking, but she's making a good point. So why don't you just say that out loud?
We'd like to send somebody down from UCSS to rural schools to do the maps and also a couple of sessions.
Yeah, I think it's great. Neil, are you on the planning committee for Rural Schools Conference?
No, I'm not. It rotates, and so this next year it will be CUES, Central Utah Educational Service Center, CUES.
Right.
Because it's at Richfield, they're doing the planning. But
okay.
Boy, I'll tell you this: the one thing that was everything was great this year at Rural Schools, except they needed more workshops and something like this. This would have been awesome, but it would maybe even be more awesome at Richfield. So
okay.
They are begging for social studies workshops.
All right, that's a great idea. Wendy?
Do we have a date on that conference yet?
Yeah, do you know the date for next year's?
Let me let me just see if I can find it real fast. I think I do have it.
Okay.
It's in July of 2020, and it's the 8th, 9th, and 10th of July.
All right, so July 9th and 10th. Okay. All right, awesome. Thank you.
Well, yeah, okay.
All right, instructional materials review process. How many people, just tell me, I just want to get a sense of the instructional materials review process that occurs here at the state for instructional materials. How often do you then use that and the reviews for consideration of your own instructional materials at the district level? Yep.
This works well, I've been involved for a long time, our district doesn't use it at all.
Okay. Okay. Yep, Chris?
We only order sample until we review it and, you know, look at that and then we get that for ourselves.
Okay, great. All right, so good. So for a number of districts, it's an important resource. And so what I want you to be aware of is that in October, so in about a month, we will be doing an instructional review of any social studies materials that come in. So if you have really good teachers who want to spend the day looking at instructional materials, I will get you that specific date. I think it's October 2nd. Can't remember, so don't quote me. But I will get that information out to you along with, I think I'll send you a really simple Google form so people can sign up if they are interested, so we can get some fresh eyes on the instructional materials. Who here has done that before? Looked at the instructional materials. Do you want to testify as to why that would be a good thing to do? You've done it before, and what's one thing that happens at the end of the day? You get swag, right? It's like you get first dibs on materials that are approved and recommended. You've got some great resources to share back with your school districts on it, okay? So I'll send out a Google form regarding that very soon, okay? All right, so hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So, folks, I'm going to have you really quickly kind of introduce yourselves. We've got a couple guest speakers here. Scott's in the back, Jan's in the front, and Deanna and I have worked for a while on Holocaust education and trying to think about resources regarding the Holocaust and genocide. So I really appreciate your passion and her specific resources that she's got available that she's going to talk about. So this will pick you up.
Okay.
So, but let's just do a quick so you get a sense of who people are.
Yes.
Okay. So.
Or a little, do you want to?
Lambert King.
You name Fulbert Alpine? Have a route.
What do you got? That's National History Day.
Harry, but
Brian Mueller, Logan City Schools.
Corey Merrill, Wayne County.
And Jordan.
Kayla Ludo, Utah Council for the Social Studies.
Chris Sweeney, Carbon School District.
Desi Olson, Salt Lake City School District.
And Scott, you want to introduce yourself because you're speaking a little bit.
Scott Massett, Topaz BC.
Oh, we are related.
Great.
Okay, where do you want me to start? So Robert and I have been working together, gosh, a couple of years now. Originally, I was working with Brian King and an attorney named Amos Giora to figure out a way to create legislation for Holocaust education. I don't know if you are aware, there's now up to about 50 states that mandate Holocaust education. However, most of the states that mandate Holocaust education don't provide supplemental funding for it. The only state that has successfully done that is New Jersey. So they, by far, have the most comprehensive Holocaust education in the country. That being said, however, doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can do locally. And I would say the greatest thing that we've done together is created a UEN site specifically with resources for Holocaust education. Now, I should probably take a step back and kind of explain how I got involved. I am a second-generation survivor. My mother was a hidden child in France. As a matter of fact, I just got back yesterday from a visit to France with my mother's rescuers. I've taken several trips with my mother back to Europe specifically for learning more about that part of my family's history. My grandparents were originally German, so I've been to Germany. I've been to France multiple times because my grandparents stayed in Europe after the war, as did my mother. My mother came here as an adult. She also speaks extensively about the Holocaust and her personal experiences, because I'm sure, as you all know, being able to tell a personal story is much more impactful than saying 1.5 million children died in the camps and 6 million Jews died and 5 million other people died for being homosexual or socialists or whatever. And so personalizing the story, and because there are resources that do that, the UEN site, if you scroll down, Robert, has some really, really good, there are some lesson plans there. There are some links to national and international resources, everything from Yad Vashem to the National Holocaust Museum. There is the Anti-Defamation League, which has developed a curriculum, and we are meeting with the regional representative later this month. The one thing that currently is not on the website, but we are working on, is developing a speakers bureau. So there are several actual survivors. Obviously, fewer and fewer of them are left. However, many of the 2Gs like myself have taken on the mantle of telling the story, because it is our story. We had lives growing up that weren't quite like everyone else. We know about the experiences of our parents. So I have personally spoken. I've spoken in Logan. My mother also spoke in Logan. There is a teacher up there who has requested me, and this year she was able to get my mother several times. And I'm happy to talk. And what I talk about is going back to Germany, going back to France, meeting the people that did what they did, what they say, which, by the way, they continue to reiterate they did nothing extraordinary, which is absolutely astounding to this day. But we have a list now of probably about a dozen people, both second generation as well as several people that are educators who have a very close link to Holocaust education, that are willing and able to come out, obviously with some advance notice, to speak in your schools.
So one of the things that we've been talking about doing is shooting like a little minute snippet of the people who could potentially come out to speak, with a little paragraph, kind of what their focus would be, right? And then if you're interested as a school, a classroom, or a district with having that person, then there'd be a way to make that request, like a link to a Google form or something where you could just submit. I'd really like so-and-so because his story is germane. And we haven't really talked about this idea, but because this is about Holocaust and genocide education, there are people in the community who could absolutely talk about the Rwandan genocide, yes, for example, right? So, I mean, to kind of enlarge this, and very similar to when Native American people talk about don't antiquate Native history, it's the same kind of concept about genocide. Don't just, there's this historic moment, but the themes, unfortunately, are still persistent. And so there are lots of possible lessons you could create. So give me a sense of, does that seem like would teachers use that if they could click on a short film to kind of get a sense of the speaker and what they might talk about, and then they could make a request?
So what level of students are you thinking that this might be most appropriate for?
Okay, so my mother will speak to children from about 5th grade and up. The younger kids, it's kind of hard, particularly in the United States. Parents get very sensitive about children being traumatized, which is understandable, and my mother is of that philosophy. There are other people who are not. which is interesting because she was 4 years old when, you know, she was taken away from her parents. But, so usually middle school and up is appropriate. And then my question for you is that to date, all of the speaking and arrangements that we've made have been very granular. There's been a particular teacher that has expressed an interest, or somebody who knew me that asked us, is there a way, and I don't want to say institutionalize at the state level, but I'm really excited that Robert had asked me to speak today in spite of my barely able to keep my eyes open. It's a long flight home. To talk to more people at the district level. I also spoke to the teachers with Meira, what was that called? The Genocide Education, the Holocaust Education Symposium that was done at the very end of August. Group of teachers very engaged, but again, those are individual teachers getting that information. And I think there are a couple things, yet there are other people from other genocides that are willing and able to speak, but for whatever reason, for the most part, probably because of the Holocaust denial that takes place. And my children even experienced some of this in school where a teacher would say, well, yeah, they said 6 million Jews died. We don't think it's that many. I mean, a teacher in a school said this to my children here in Utah. So I think that the Holocaust denial movement created a ready, willing, and able group of people at the time, starting about 20 years ago, really wanting to get their stories out. So I think that's what differentiates it. The institutionalization of the murder is also unique, but the experiences of people as individuals is not. However, I believe that there's been a higher voice because there have been so many people that said it didn't really happen, or, you know, there weren't ovens, or this didn't happen, or that didn't happen. So it is unbelievable. I mean, my mother was horrified, and my mother's a former teacher, so she speaks really well to students. I almost killed her in April. She spoke to 6 different schools over 3 days. I'm not allowed to do that again. She will be in Utah, here in Salt Lake, and will be available on October 2nd and 3rd. I thought she was leaving later on the 4th, but she's not. So if there's something that we can leverage, unfortunately, this visit, I don't think we can go too far afield. However, with enough advance notice, I would be happy myself to speak, you know, in other parts of Utah. But, you know, if we can get her at least out to 2 groups of students, middle or high school, that would be great. Yep. And that's my thing.
Right. So we kind of, we have a survey that we're going to send out.
Oh, good.
As well, that kind of get a sense of the state regarding Holocaust and genocide education. So I'll need your help with kind of promulgating that as best you can. We know that if Utah's anything like the nation, a lot of Holocaust education actually doesn't occur in social studies classrooms. It occurs in language arts classrooms.
Because night.
So you've got Night, you've got Anne Frank diary, you've got Number of Stars,
my mom's book.
You've got, yeah, right.
My mother has a book that was written for young adults called Your Name is Renee. Your Name is Renee. The author is Stacy Kretzmeyer. She does have a study guide. I'm actually flying out to Philadelphia this weekend, so I will be seeing her again.
Cool.
I can find out more.
Yeah,
I know
so
the
I'll
study
send
guide
you all
is
of
kind of dated, but as a former educator herself, she taught French for over 30 years at a school in Philadelphia. She put together a guide, and there's also a DVD, a video that was self-produced by my parents where they went back probably about 25 years ago, spoke to the rescuers, and asked them why they did what they did. And that probably is the most remarkable. It is subtitled. I'm going to watch it again. And that's also a resource that could be made available. So, I mean, and I'm just talking about one person. You know, my mother is not unique. There are plenty of other stories and books and resources available. And I think we'll also learn a lot more when the ADL person comes
Right.
about what are some more robust resources that are more global in nature, but I think it's important to teach these lessons as global and then as individual, because when they realize that they're seeing someone who experienced this themselves or the child, because soon there won't be people who can tell their own story, that it has a huge impact.
How do we get a hold of you, or?
I'll send, is that right? I'll just
Send my email,
yeah.
and I'd like to get something scheduled sooner rather than later, but
But
she
if you
told
just
me.
want to say your email right now, this is a recording, and so you
Oh,
will have
okay.
it. So if you want to.
So my first name is spelled like Diane, D-I-A-N-E. It is French, so I am Diane. Period, Warsaw, W-A-R-S, like Sam, O, 2 F's like Frank, @gmail.com. Just in the subject line, let me know that you heard me today, and I'd be happy to make arrangements. I'd really like to stick to anywhere from, Weber down to Utah County this time, just because we don't have a lot of time.
That's right. Still the vast majority of
I understand.
here, but also.
I'm
teachers,
also
so
eager at some point, either with her or with myself, to come to some of the more rural schools. My
Yeah.
mother was one of the guest speakers at the Anne Frank exhibit 8 years ago, and she spoke to the kids that came up from southeastern
San
Utah.
Juan or probably would have been San Juan District, perhaps.
Yeah, somewhere out that way, and
Uh-huh.
like these kids somebody chartered buses for them to come up to Salt Lake, and she said they
We have
were
a giant map. We could go look and see where they came from. So.
It's near the National I'm sorry. I'll remember as I walk out.
It's all right. It's a long flight, so you're fine. The other thing is we just talked about the Rural Schools Conference, so this could be a really that's in July of next
Right.
year in Richfield, so we'll talk about that as well.
Mhm.
I also want to point out that Wendy Rexatson in State History has been instrumental in bringing in folks from Echoes and Reflections, which is an organization.
An excellent organization. Yes. No, we're meeting with someone from the ADL.
And a defamation league out of.
The Anti-Defamation League, and they have, I think it's called like No Place for Hatred. I mean, it's
Right.
a more global lesson, and it starts with bullying and othering people, because, as you all know, it's not like one day the Jews were free in Germany and the next day they were being exterminated in camps. It all happened in steps, and those are the lessons the kids need to know. So, Echoes and, well, you had them out for 2 days, I think, earlier this year.
Yep.
So I was unfortunate. Absolutely.
Great. Any other questions, or, I'm going to show you really quickly the kind of survey. I'd love any feedback you have on this. I may have shared this with you before, but basically it's like, I'll get rid of that first option there, but I'm an active educator. So I'm an active educator. The first credit, just a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
Then what do they teach? The subjects or courses that I teach, I currently teach about the Holocaust, yes or no. I currently teach about genocide and or specific instances of genocide, yes or no. And then I don't currently teach either topic because of this main reason. Then they can select, not the standards, not age appropriate. I don't feel confident. I feel it's already taught about enough in other classes, or other. If you chose other, please explain your choice. Then just statements. I feel well prepared to teach about the history of anti-Semitism. I feel well prepared to teach about the role of propaganda when teaching these topics. I teach about concepts of scapegoating and stereotyping when teaching about these topics. It's essential to teach about white supremacist thinking when addressing the Holocaust. I would like more professional learning about teaching about the Holocaust. In particular, I'd like to learn more about blank. I'm very familiar with lesson ideas, what readings, etc. I would invite a guest speaker if available. I'd like to receive Holocaust and genocide professional learning updates, and here's my email address, and then I would like to add this comment. So that's what we're going to send out, and I'm just curious about, I know it's just quick, but if you have any, like, it's too long, or we didn't ask the right question, or...
The only thing I would add, go back up. I think, okay, there was something. Okay.
So that's that. We'll send out on my listserv and just see what people have to say. Give us a sense. Yep.
Maybe you just, if you're a teacher in the classroom, put your district specialist
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great, good point. What's your role, right? Because otherwise, you would feel like, well, I can't answer this. Yeah. All right, great.
And
Well,
I guess, and then the only other thing is you'll have my contact information. If there's anything that we can do to coordinate on a district level, because we know, it's great when individual teachers get in touch with us, but if there's anything that me or Robert or the group of very, very, very dedicated volunteers can do to help at the district level, help disseminate information and make it useful, please let me know.
Great, awesome. Thanks, Dion.
Thank you.
Will you give Dion a round of applause, please, for traveling, coming back, but your long-standing passion and commitment to this work is,
Unfortunately, it's my personal story, so.
yeah, we're glad you're with us.
Great.
All right, Mr. Bassett.
Another great.
Right? So, how many people have been to the Topaz Museum? Okay. It is, it's amazing to see a real thing, isn't it? It's incredible. I mean, if you just go to the website and you see, I know that, and many of you know Scott, as a curriculum director, and all of your work in the Delta area, but your devotion, you and Jane Beckwith have been just amazing resources regarding telling the story of Topaz. I would love it if you told people that you grew up there, and I'd love for people to hear a little bit about that. I'm going to bring this mic over for you.
And can you get this
Yeah, we'll get you set up.
little movie?
Yep.
Okay, so I can,
Do you know which one?
yeah, this one right here.
Okay, great. We'll take care of that.
Okay, yeah, I grew up in Delta, Utah, on a farm in Sutherland, about 10 miles, probably maybe about 8 miles from Topaz, from the German side. And I hate to say it, but I was a sophomore in college at the University of Utah before I ever knew anything about history. It's never taught in school. And I grew up right next to it. I used to ride my bicycle by the camp and didn't even know it was off in the brush. So we were assigned as part of a Utah history class at the University of Utah to do some type of project for Utah. And the professor said to the class, if you're not sure what to do it on, come and visit with me after class. So I went up and I said, well, I'm not really sure. Do you have a project for me? And he said, oh, aren't you the boy from Delta? And I said, yeah, I'm the boy from Delta. And he said, well, do it on Topaz. So I came home that weekend and asked my mother why he wanted me to do a paper on Topaz Mountain. And she said, oh, not Topaz Mountain, Topaz. I'm going, what are you talking about? Well, we have a Topaz barn in our yard. You know that I danced with the Topaz soldiers during World War II. I said, Mother, you're making absolutely no sense. And she said, well, there was a camp here for Japanese Americans during World War II. And so since that time, 1973, I have been very passionate about getting that word out because it's definitely a story that needs to be told. Like Dan said, we're kind of related. I'd say we're probably third cousin, 5 times removed as far as the Holocaust and the internment. But there are a lot of issues that are the very same. While Robert's getting that movie to come up, I wanted to kind of show that as kind of a teaser. I do want to thank Robert and Brian and you as a group for letting me come today. We have a grant program that we want to offer to the schools. And it's sponsored by the Utah State Board of Education, by Millard County School District, the Utah Division of State History, the Great Basin National Heritage Partnership, and then, of course, the Topaz Museum. Our basic premise is to provide educators with materials, curriculum materials, so that you can instruct today's students World War II Japanese American internment and its relevance today. It is just as relevant today as any other time in history. And then our second prong is to invite students and teachers to the Topaz Museum in Delta, Utah. And we provide money for those kinds of experiences. The Topaz Museum's mission is the golden rule. One of our very last exhibits in the Constitution room states the Bible, Genesis 13 and 8. Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, for we be brethren. And especially with the younger kids, that we talk about the golden rule, we talk about bullying, etc. We kind of have a little presentation that we just do. With the older kids, of course, it's a little bit more detailed. We just feel really strongly that today, in today's society, our message rings true. So I'll go ahead and distribute these. This is just kind of a little flyer about the grant program that we have. So we will get that out. Ooh, may I have one? Thank you. If you'll just turn on the inside page, and it is available to all Utah educators and also White Pine County School District in Nevada. The reason for that is because Miller County School District has White Pine students, and White Pine has Miller County students out on the desert at the National Park. So anyway, I've listed there the bullets on the very first page. We do provide a suggested lesson plan. The Utah Division of State History has been excellent in helping us provide materials, and so we appreciate that very much. We will provide an elementary and a secondary library. I've got some of the books that we provide on the table in the back. There's, of course, the website link to the topazmuseum.org, and I really think that's probably the very best place where you can get materials. We also have some limited teaching materials that were created by the Japanese American Citizens League, and then we are available for classroom presentation. If you'll turn over to the very last page, this is kind of a suggested format that we have. That to get the facts about Topaz, there is no better book than Leonard J. Arrington's The Price of Prejudice. And that is found on our website. So, and we are planning on getting it published again, but we haven't done that yet. We're a totally volunteer organization. We have no paid staff. So it takes us a while to get things done. We encourage teachers to talk about through our experience, Pearl Harbor, et cetera, et cetera. A recommended museum or site visit schedule is if you could arrive at the museum in Delta at 10 a.m. We do an hour to 2 hour presentation. Then you could either have lunch in the park if you're packing school lunches or however you do that, or you could do it on the bus if you need to cut your time a little bit short. And we actually do take, and it's really quite, kids get the idea if we actually take them out to the site. And so we take them to the site, we show several buildings that were purchased by local people after the war, made into homes, businesses, et cetera. Then we go to the actual site, and we do a walkthrough of a block. The Topaz Museum Board owns the entire site, the mile square city, the 640 acres. Minus 6 acres. Is there anybody here from Park City? Oh, okay, we need your help.
Oh, no.
We have a gentleman in Park City that will not relinquish his 6 acres. We've offered him lots of money, all sorts of things, and he finally came to the table and he said, if you'll buy me 6 acres of land in Park City, I will trade you. Now, if you've ever been to Topaz, it's probably worth maybe $6,000 at the most, the property. So, and it has a bunch of junky, trashy mobile homes on it. So we're hoping that the county will just condemn it and we'll be able to move on. And then you can depart basically around 2 or it can be 1 o'clock. I know we do have a lot of visitors that come. We've had visitors from, especially the southern part of the state. We've had visitors from Salt Lake, visitors from Provo. I know some of the school districts say they don't have the ability to come because of the schedule. And all I can say is boo-hoo. Because if you're from Millard School District and you go on a field trip, it takes at least an hour or an hour and a half to get anywhere. So I would encourage you to maybe try and make an exception to the rules. Okay, we're ready probably for this, so we'll go ahead and start this one.
We need to just scroll back to the beginning and then we'll just start. So sound, I think, might just be coming out of the laptop rather than through the speakers.
Okay. That's
See how it sounds.
very important thing.
And this is the film that's shown at the museum as well?
It is, or we could bring it to your classrooms and show it.
I don't know how much we've learned from it. I don't know how much we learned from a lot of our past mistakes.
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone. Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry. Military authorities therefore determined that all of them, citizens and aliens alike, would have to move.
There's nothing we know other than our life here. I don't know where else I would go. Nobody knew where we were going.
The desert of central Utah. An empty stretch of sky and dust. Almost beautiful in its darkness. But hidden in the brush of this lonely landscape are the ruins of an ugly past. The remains of a city called Topaz.
The time, spring and summer of 1942. The place, 10 different relocation centers.
On September 11th, 1942, after a long cross-country journey, busloads of men, women, and children arrived at the gates of Topaz. Gates today marked by a sign in the desert.
My mother told me that this is our world now.
Uprooted to a world of barbed wire and guard towers, the new residents of Topaz struggle to cope.
We're living in a barrack behind the barbed wire, the desert of Utah.
What do we need to be locked in like this in this wide open, wild place?
Were we the enemies?
At Topaz today, debris and concrete foundations serve as a reminder of the memories that haunt this abandoned landmark.
First thing we faced, the Topaz. Dust.
We were walking in ankle-deep dust.
We woke up and we were covered with sand because there had been a dust storm.
In all this dust, we see army towers and rows of black tar-papered cities.
They all looked like sheds. They didn't look like homes.
Internees try to make the best of life at camp, smiling for the camera despite it all.
There were 6 in our family and we were all in one big room. I remember singing songs. We did what little kids do, learn to read, and we drew pictures, and we had recess time.
Every block has their baseball team.
The Topaz Welcome Guide helped orient residents to camp life, but its rules and regulations shatter any illusion of normalcy. The do's and don'ts of Topaz. Do keep your city clean and participate in civic events. Do participate
he was walking by the fence and was hard of hearing. The guard shot him and he died. It is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness.
Though the wilderness grows back around it, this once square mile in the desert will always wear the scars of topaz, just as Japanese Americans will always carry the scars of the internment.
My mother had a very hard time in Topaz, to the point where she couldn't carry on. She never did recover from that.
Nothing can pay for the humiliation.
With liberty and justice for all, except us. Well, I was going through the credits. Do any of you know Ted Nugget? Okay, Ted Nugget lives in Salt Lake City. He's a graphic artist. He's the one who said that his mother just, couldn't deal with it at all. So we quite often share the story of Ted. He and his sister were ages 9 and 10, and they were in camp on the very last day, which was October 31st, 1945. What happened to you if you were still in camp at that particular time is the government gave you $25, put you on the train, and sent you off to your designated destination. Ted and his sister were shipped to St. Anne's Orphanage in Salt Lake City. Now, the reason why they were shipped there is because the administration at camp knew that the father had left camp a couple of months earlier. He'd gone to Salt Lake to try and find work, but no one wanted to hire Japanese American, so he had not yet found work. What we know about Mrs. Nagata is she spent a lot of her time when she was at Topaz in the hospital, the Topaz Hospital. She was eventually transferred to the Utah State Mental Hospital in Provo, where she lived the rest of her life and then died there. So like Ted said, she was never really a part of the family. We have stories like that we share, but we also have stories of resilience that we share. If we were to come to your classroom, we would definitely show that movie, and then we would follow it up with a home movie that was taken at Topaz by Dave Tatsuno. And you can actually find it online. Just type in Topaz home movie, and it will come up. It's actually a 48-minute long movie. We just show about that length of it, basically. And it is one of only 2 home movies in the Library of Congress, and the other one is the assassination of President Kennedy. So it kind of shows you the importance that the government realized that film was, telling about history.
Part of that was cameras were banned, right? I mean, the reason why you don't have more home film or footage in the camp is because that footage.
It was considered contraband, basically. The evening of Pearl Harbor, if you were a leader in the community, of course, the FBI and the police quite often showed up at your doorstep, demanded your cameras, firearms, your radios, etc., and they told the rest of the population to turn those things in. Well, Dave didn't want to turn in his camera because it was brand new, and he was afraid he would never see it again. So he left it with a friend in Oakland. And there's a cool story that follows. One day he's out walking with one of the administrators in camp, Walter Hondrick, who was a conscientious objector. And anyway, he and Walter are walking along. Walter's taking photos. Dave says, "Oh, I die to have my camera here." Walter said, I mean, this is at the very beginning of internment in 42. And Walter said, well, where is your camera? Dave said, well, I left it with a friend in Oakland. So Walter got the friend's address, sent for the camera, got the camera for Dave, and gave it to him to get to his apartment. Dave goes, this is my camera. And Walter tells him, just be careful. Don't take it where the guards are. And of course, Dave has to film it secretively. It is interesting, though, to note later on during the internment, they actually had a photo shop at Topaz. So they loosened those restrictions after a period of time. Anyway, I'm telling too many. So anyway, we have a grant application. It's very similar to the one that you saw.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the SurveyMonkey grant application process that we'll send out to you, okay? Just simple application of interest. But even the archaeology, and there's so many lessons you can learn. How many people have been to Topaz, to the site, okay? It's one of those things where at first, the first reaction a lot of kids will have is, there's nothing here.
Adults have that reaction.
Right? I wasn't gonna say that about us, but you're right, right? There's nothing here. That's because after the war, even those resources like the barracks are moved off to farms and used, like, as I was saying, in town. But it's just like an archaeologist. I mean, the archaeologist would say, oh, there is so much here. You just have to look beneath the surface, or on the surface, or reimagine. You start to see just how much is still there, and how many lessons you can learn from that. And that's a great lesson to teach about, even about the importance of archaeology, right? The importance of leaving artifacts exactly where you find them. It's very tempting to find a broken pop bottle and take it as a souvenir of Topaz. It's like, don't do it. And Jane just gets so aggravated by how much stuff is even
Now, people bring things into us at the museum, and we'll go, thank you so much, and then we will return and take them back out to the museum. We don't know, we're certainly not placing them where they were, but we hide them behind bushes, et cetera.
So we will send the information. Any questions you have for Scott about this work? This is obviously also a labor of love. I mean, the incredible devotion that these people have to making sure this story is not forgotten amongst the sagebrush is incredible.
Does Ted speak about it?
I think Ted would speak. He hasn't spoken with the museum for some time, but I think you could invite him to come and speak. Yeah.
Do you have?
I don't have his information, but I can get it to you. So I'll remember
What
to
was
do
his
that.
last name?
Nagata. Yeah. He's really renowned.
Wendy's got a question for you, Scott.
Yes.
Hey, Scott, so is this grant program also open to like charters and private?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I have a lot of those on my list.
It's for every public school. I mean, in fact, we were even gonna send it out to private schools and different things, but we don't have. Do you have their addresses? A way to contact them?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, we can try to figure it out. I mean,
Yeah.
We'll just,
Yeah.
I have.
just for,
Maybe there's someone that's in charge of private schools, you know, or whatever. We want to get it out to everyone. Ideally, our audience, we get Millard County third graders because they're studying county history. But starting at the fourth grade is where it really starts to make sense. I'm an old fourth grade teacher, okay, and I remember we'd spend about a week doing Topaz things. And I remember taking students out to the site. Of course, I prepped them for it, and I will never forget one little girl. I told them, you know, they needed to be respectful, and we stayed in groups, and I thought they were being fine. But one little girl got after a couple of boys because they were, you know, kind of horsing around. I thought it was okay. I mean, it didn't bother me. But anyway, she said, can't you feel the spirits that are still here? I mean, a fourth grader. So they can get that feeling from it.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah, the museum is an amazing resource, and we don't want to think about, well, maybe we should think about the analogies to today in terms of what we will look back on and think about our current state of affairs. All right, Luciano, do you mind sharing some? And you can be right there. You can make sure that speaker is on. Oh, great. Okay, yeah. So, are you on the wireless? Okay. So I'm gonna escape, and then I'll show you. Or Brian, do you want to just kind of help? What happens is you're going to go to your browser, and you're going to type in the secret code up there, 10107125. And anybody else who wants to share their desktop and share how many emails you're trying to catch up on, or whatever, you can do that at any time. So you type that in, and then it will set up. You what? Then it'll run, or it'll ask you to download, and then you download the app the magic Wi-Fi Crestron Supermatic 47-5.
Ask an easy question while we're waiting. Please do. Our district is, looking for a book to read, for our teacher leaders to read, whether it's all elementary and secondary together, or just elementary and secondary separate. They have good examples of, especially elementary. Their focus is formative assessment, my focus is teach social studies. Are there any suggestions? Let me read this year.
I could make a suggestion. Journey to Topaz for Elementary Children in Desert Exile, both by Yoshiko Uchida. And she tells her story, biography, and this is historical fiction. So.
All right. Do you, I mean, Corey, that's something where we wanted to send out that question to folks.
Well, I have things that I can find. I just wondered if other districts has been doing that. Yeah. Okay. Right.
There's I mean, UCS, I mean, the National Council for the Social Studies says every year the notable, are you all familiar with the notable trade fairs, which they do every year? It's an annotated bibliography of recent trade books that are recommended. Quinn Robbins was on that committee 4 or 5 years in a row, just reading through lots and lots of books, kind of like the Sundance Film Fest of notable trade books, to find the good ones out of a whole raft of bad ones. So, all right. I think this is an awesome social studies meeting because there are like guest speakers instead of just listening to me for hours on end. So now we have Marzulli, who has this cool job of outreach to K-12, K-16, but K-12 education as well. So we got to meet, and I'm like, I would love to hear more about the ways that we can connect institutions of higher ed, in this case the University of Utah, with K-12. So, take it over.
Thank you so much for the time. Again, I do outreach for the University of Utah's Asia Center and Center for Latin American Studies. We're both national resource centers, which means that we get Title VI funds from the Department of Education, which facilitates our outreach efforts among some other initiatives that I'll talk a little bit about here today. So because both of our centers are housed in the College of Humanities, most of our focus is relevant to social studies teachers, most of our expertise. And so our definition of outreach is providing professional learning opportunities for teachers in K through 12 settings who want to teach about Asia or Latin America. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done in the past, some accessible resources that you can find online, and I'll share those links with you, and an invitation to collaborate for future professional learning. So I will mention that we do have, the office that I work for has 4 academic programs, Asian Studies, Latin American Studies, Middle East Studies, and International Studies. So these are 4 distinct majors and minors at the University of Utah. And the 2 top ones, or the 2 first listed, the Asian Studies program and the Latin American Studies program, both have master's programs. So I'd like to let people know about that in case you know colleagues or you yourself are interested in the master's program. We have those in Asian Studies and Latin American Studies. Part of what our Title VI funding helps us do as well is support the instruction of less commonly taught languages. So I have listed here all the less commonly taught languages that are taught at the University of Utah. The one that's not listed was just added this fall is Samoan. And so I share this because I would imagine that many of you have heritage language speakers in your classrooms that speak some of these heritage languages. Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Urdu, Korean, certainly Farsi or Persian, and Russian, Vietnamese are definitely languages that we hear spoken in classrooms throughout the state of Utah.
Well, and the cool thing too, Luciano, is that we've got a number of these are also in our dual language immersion programs, right? And some of the people here are in charge of social studies and world languages. So I know Desi and anybody else, other than Pam and Desi, or world language, split their work with world languages. Anybody else? So yeah, so it's great.
Yeah, and we do some support. We do some support with the Chinese dual language immersion program as well as the Portuguese dual language immersion program.
Okay.
The other reason I mention these is because we offer a fellowship or a scholarship for students who study less commonly taught languages. So just a snapshot, this is for undergraduates, we're able to provide up to $10,000 towards tuition with a $5,000 stipend for students who receive this scholarship during the academic year. For graduate students, the support is much more significant. But this is something that we like to share early on because little by little we're getting more students who apply coming out of high school who are either part of the dual language immersion program or who are heritage language speakers and are good candidates for this scholarship.
That's great.
So now I'm going to talk about some existing resources. I'm going to go through and click through these so I can give you some examples. So our funding is in grant cycles. We're in year 2 of our current grant cycle. It'll wrap up in 2022, and we're planning to reapply through both centers. But our last grant cycle, we had an initiative focused on AP Art History and AP World History. And through that, we created some resources. Basically, we would bring lecturers locally or from other institutions of higher education to talk about the updated global curriculum for AP Art History. It was updated in 2015. So anyone who had done a traditional art history program, those programs were typically focused on Western European art. And so adding art outside of Western Europe was a significant challenge.
What a novel concept, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm just going to click on one of these examples, and I can share this PowerPoint with you so you can see, so you can follow these along whenever you see fit. So this is a nice example, front piece of the Codex Mendoza. This is from the AP Art History curriculum, but it's also something that's applicable to world history if you're talking about Spanish contact in Mexico. This is a codex that was created after contact. So there's a lot that can be explored here within social studies. And we have these videos that we have clips, some of them are longer than others, but we have listed here, who the faculty is leading. We have some WorldCat citations, so you can certainly do more investigation. And I would encourage you, if you're an art history teacher or world history teacher, or geography teacher, to click through some of these and see what's relevant to you or to some of the colleagues that you have.
Well, and I think, this raises a great point about how, I don't know about you, but I think in history classes, the role of the arts is so essential. To be able to bring in art and music and poetry and all the ways that people create and tell their story is, this is what Topaz is doing with the art and the films and the writings and the young adult novels. There are all of these cultural creations that bring history to life, right? So, great.
Last year, the Natural History Museum of Utah had an almost year-long exhibit on the Maya, and we collaborated with them to do some professional learning workshops for educators.
We had a social studies meeting up there, and I think, did you guys get a chance to see that? Those of you who were at the museum, they had some replicas of the giant stela.
Yeah, it was a great exhibit. But their exhibit is they were very STEM focused. And so we put together a web page focused on social studies and humanities. So if you click on here, we have some suggestions for young readers. Margarito's Forest is both there's an English and a Spanish language version. And some of these, like this one, for example, has an educator guide. So you can get info on some key concepts. A lot of these educator guides that I'm going to share with you are developed by teachers in other states. So they tend to meet social studies standards. It looks like it's in language that would speak to teachers. Some essential questions to ask here. Where are we? Okay, so that's the Maya resources page. So again, young readers, historical and nonfiction works, and then we have some video content. There's this really great YouTube videos where they did interviews with people living in Guatemala right after the end of the Civil War. The peace accords were signed in 1996. And so there's this documentary that was released in 1998, interviewing people after the peace accords were signed. And then they did a part 2 in 2015, where they found the same people and they're asking them similar questions about what progress has been made after the peace accords. And then we have some film recommendations as well. ReadU is a recently opened center that our centers are collaborating with our College of Education. So the thing that's featured here are authors visits that we've had in the past. But the focus for ReadU, Reading for Empathy, Awareness, and Diversity with You, is creating book sets that are accessible to teachers and families across the Wasatch Front. And so they're currently in development. The book sets are themed. So some of the book sets will deal with grief and loss, trauma, warfare, but then there's also other book sets focused on Latin America, Asian content. And there will be more to come regarding ReadU. And then the last thing I'm going to share here about existing resources is CLASP, which is the Consortium for Latin American Studies Programs. So our center is a member of CLASP. This is a national organization. So CLASP issues an annual book award called the Americas Award. And one of the things we do with the Americas Award is create resources for teachers specific to the winning titles. So I'm just going to click here on Teachers Resources so that you can see that since 1993, at least one of the winning titles, there's been a teacher's resource created. And then we have on the right-hand side here, you can see some curated collections, America's Award titles about artists, musicians, and writers, America's Award books on Brazil. So depending on what your interests are, you can find either book recommendations or you can find some educator guides for specific titles. That's great. And the other thing that I can share here related to CLASP is if we go back and go to K-12 resources, we have examples of syllabus to develop Latin American Studies classes. So we have an example of a high school syllabus for introduction to Latin American Studies. And then there's some content-specific curriculum as well.
Are we aware of does anybody have a class that as an elective? I mean, we've certainly had, the opportunities. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse, say.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So, again, these are resources that are available to anyone at any time. I think part of my work is letting people know that they exist.
Right.
They tend to be buried on these websites. But my experience has been that, once people become aware of these resources, if they apply to your classroom, they can be very useful, or at least it can be a springboard for something that you're trying to do in your own classroom.
Well, I know that, for example, people teach film studies classes, or they'll teach history through film as electives as well. So here's some films that might not have been the first things people thought about, but they could be brought into the canon, so to speak. So, yeah, that's great.
So now I'm just going to mention some of the professional learning opportunities that we typically engage in from year to year. So we partner with the Tanner Humanities Center at the University of Utah. They run a summer-long Tanner Gateway to Learning workshop series. These are week-long workshops during the summer. They're $90 to register. That includes materials, lunch for the week, parking on campus. And then you're able to pay for 3 higher ed credits for an additional $50. So it's a pretty affordable way to get higher ed credits in a short amount of time. So the last 2 that we did this summer, we did one on immigration from Latin America. These are just screenshots from the website. And then for the Asia Center, we focused on Chinese labor and the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. We've done other one-time, one-day workshops at centers. Some of the themes, again, immigration from Central America, refugee experiences from both world regions, North Korea. And I'll mention that these top 3 were done in collaboration with Salt Lake School District. And the way that we did that is we surveyed teachers regarding their interests in the world region, as well as their priorities for requirements, course standards.
I'd like to just say they were outstanding. They were really good.
When did you offer them, Jesse? Were they during the day? Were they after school?
They were after school. I think one was during a professional development
Yeah.
day, the optional professional development day, and the other ones were after school.
And what's your geographic availability? Would you be able to, do you have funding to be able to send someone out or have a university professor, or what was the kind of makeup of that?
Yeah, so typically we'll get a faculty member to lead the workshop. And so, yeah, it just depends on who we're working with, their capacity to travel long distance, if you're asking in terms of like going to outside of the Wasatch Front. Yeah, right. We can explore that certainly. We also have the Utah Council for the Social Studies conference in November. I mean, these topics are going to be, again, topics of interest for teachers. I don't know where we are, because I missed that meeting, to know how full we are, but he's a great contact. So I'll just share a couple of upcoming opportunities. With the Americas Award, typically they've done a workshop just for DC area teachers. They always do the award announcement in September, and they do it at the Library of Congress. Well, this year they're doing a live broadcast of the workshop that's going to be offered, that has typically just been offered for teachers in Washington, D.C. So there's a link here. You can join that if you're available, and I'm imagining it'll be recorded for rebroadcast. So one of the award-winning authors is going to be doing a workshop regarding his work. And then this other series, the Global Reads webinar series, is something that several other national resource centers with other world region focuses have collaborated on. And this is it's a 1-hour webinar. It happens in the spring. But every month there's a 1-hour webinar focused on an award-winning title from 4 different world regions. So there will be Latin America focus, an Asia focus, Africa, and Middle East. And those are really great because oftentimes the author will participate or a publisher will participate, and there's opportunities to do Q&A with them. And then the last thing I'll mention is coming up in November, we're bringing T. Bowie. She's an author, illustrator. She wrote a graphic memoir called The Best We Could Do, about her family's departure from Vietnam at the end of the war. So she'll be here just across the street from us right now at the Salt Lake Public Library on the evening of November 7th. That could be a cool tie-in. I mean, UCSS, you might want to think about even a book club, not a book club, but like if
people got the novel beforehand, I think that'd be really cool. Will you email Brian this PowerPoint?
Yeah.
And we'll send it out.
And I have a bunch of handouts, so I brought a TBUE poster for everyone here. I think there's just enough.
Great.
You can take them back to your schools. And then I have bookmarks I'll definitely send this, but I have bookmarks for our Maya resources page, a bunch of other information. So thanks so much. Let me know if you have any questions.
Great. All right. So, Brian, will you help him just stop broadcasting and then I'll start over here? That's great. Yeah, it's nice. One of the things that one of the things that I did was I had a really great teacher, Megan Osborne. She just mined the depths of institutions of higher ed's web pages and has created this giant spreadsheet of professors at the institutions of higher ed, what they're working on, what their research is, how to get a hold of them, that I will share with you as possible resources and guest speakers and possibilities for collaboration. So I really appreciate the fact that our whole intention is that if students want to continue their education, that they have the skill set, that they know some of those possibilities. Just the scholarship opportunities are pretty awesome. So thank you very much for that. Okay, we're just going to keep barreling along. History 1700. Can someone tell me what History 1700 is? Do you know what that course is? It's U.S. history. It's U.S. history. Basically, it meets the general education. It's not a higher level course. The 2700s are when you start getting into and the 30s are higher level. So this is History 1700 is a class. It's a survey of U.S. history, of all of U.S. history. Okay. And it's all of U.S. history, but basically, all of recorded U.S. history. So we're talking about 500 years of U.S. history in a semester. So our argument over the years has been that History 1700 does not meet the core credit requirement that is met by U.S. History 2. Because U.S. History 2 is a full year class that teaches U.S. history, and about how many years of U.S. history does it try to cover? Right. It starts, the new standards begin post-Reconstruction. Okay? So we're talking 1880 to the present, about 140 years of American history, not 500 years of U.S. history, and not in a half year, but in a full year. So we're like, that course doesn't connect. Now, AP U.S. history is, again, a full survey of U.S. history, but it's a full year. So we allow that full year course to meet the requirement of the U.S. History 2 course, but not the half year semester at the college level. Yes.
So this is the one that counts for current district and current enrollment.
Right.
But I don't know of anywhere that it's only taught for half a year.
Right. If it's taught for a full year, it'll count for. So here's the thing: if it's taught for a full year, it's fine to teach it, to count it for core credit. The issue is when it's a half year. What we say is, if you teach it for a half year, you have to supplement it with another half year of U.S. History 2 in order for it to count. My question to you is just, as far as you know, is that still workable for people? Or are there any issues that have come up? Because the people in concurrent enrollment, part of their desire is to just like get rid of History 1700 and say, if you want to take a class that meets core credit, take History 2710. That's the class that would meet that requirement. So I don't know, are we trying to solve a problem that doesn't, are we looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, or are things going okay? Do you know enough? Do you need to find out more information before you can answer that?
Not a problem in our district, but I can see it might be a problem with online or in some of the other districts that are a little more advanced.
All right. Well, if I run across anything that's proposed or any kind of possible changes to the status quo, I'll let you know so you can let me know what implications might be. Okay? Yep.
When you're talking about concurrent enrollment, though, SCU would like to offer human geography as a concurrent enrollment class, but there's not a state code. There is for world regional geography, which I think is Geography 1300, but we don't understand why, if there's an AP human geography, why isn't there a state code for?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's probably just something that we can just create. I mean, it would make sense, right? That if there's an AP human, that if you want to teach a concurrent enrollment human geography, that would be.
Who should I contact to see if we can go forward with that?
Yeah, just shoot me an email. I'll talk, because our data steward, her name is Kristen Campbell, and she will. We can look at the code. Usually, it may be adjusting that code, the concurrent enrollment code, to have a better name, or we'll figure it out.
Okay.
So, yep.
This is a tougher question. How do you know what they're doing at the schools?
Don't know.
As far as credit goes.
Yeah. That's where accreditation comes in. That's where, but I don't know. I mean, we can say we want you to teach Utah Studies all year long in 7th grade, and in some places in a middle school where the calendar is trimesters, Utah Studies can become a trimester long. I don't have any control over that. I don't know.
Well, our fight is with the AP Geography in district. In our district.
What is the fight?
We teach AP Geography for a year. How are they going to pick up their own history?
You teach it in 10th grade.
Hello?
What do you teach that?
Hey?
So the challenge there is, if you teach a full year of AP, where and how will students get their world history credit? Will it,
Yeah, I have my off.
There are other places that turn that world history course into a blended world history geography class.
We do too, but that doesn't necessarily work so well with the AP.
Right, yeah.
So the result has been they do what they want and try to hope nobody looks at it. But that's our issue. But it's the same thing with the C.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's more about what is right. Are you doing what's best for kids, and are you hewing to the standards that we ask? And we certainly have no ability at the state level to crack down. If you're not hewing to that expectation, should be that's a local board deciding that we're staying consistent with what the standard expectations are. All right, just so you know, we have our Nugget courses kicking off. I'll send you the information out, but please note there's a separation between the Nuggets and the online endorsement courses. Nuggets will give you USBE credit, but not endorsement. You can't cobble them together to create an endorsement.
The Nugget courses kind of along the vein of the badges that include too, or is it much different?
I can imagine that some people could see that as, you know, the badging as these are like micro-credentialing, and badging is kind of the lingo that's out there. I mean,
That's what the state, that's what mine is using.
yeah. I mean, essentially, similar skill set. Some of them are like skills, some of them are specific content. But we haven't talked about them as creating badges, you know, necessarily, but.
Well, my question is, moving in that courses, 2 badges, that's it.
It might be, yeah, right.
If the badges become the method of PD for the state, then I'm sure that will happen.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Online, one of the classes that we're offering in the fall is a course on the Topaz Internment Camp that Jane Beckwith will be teaching. So I think there's still room to enroll in that. You search just under social studies on Midas, and you'll see the courses that are available for registration.
The Nugget Courses.
The Nugget Courses will be on Midas as well. Yep. But definitely the online courses are already there. Yep. Okay. I don't know if people remember this lecture series from last year. There's a lecture series. This is a lecture by John Meekum. He actually was the keynote at the Topaz Internment, or not Topaz, at the Transcontinental Railroad commemoration up at Golden Spike. So he's going to be coming out to speak about the free press in America, November 9th. It's free. It's a free lecture. He's great. It takes place up at Roland Hall in Salt Lake City. He's a very thoughtful person, but I want to show you the essay competition. Okay, so we promoted this essay competition last year. We're promoting it again. This is in conjunction with Mccarthy. You've got links here for any more information, but here's the link. But check out what the students write a 750-word essay, and they can get $2,500. So there are essay contests, and then there are essay contests, and this is an essay contest. Okay. So this is an original essay concerning freedom of the press, and here are the categories. And for grades 6 through 8, it's 500 words that equates to $1,500, and it's a good math lesson. You can help kids understand that that's $3 per word. So, and I'll just here's more information about freedom of the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy. It's Walter Cronkite's quotation. I'm hoping it is. And explain the meaning of that quote and provide examples to support your explanation. And there you go. So this could be a really cool thing for UCSS to promote. And they were absolutely delighted and blown away by the responses they got last year to the essay contest, which is why they hit me up again to help promote it. So there's that. Okay. So I have the link on the PowerPoint for the McCarthy lecture series. The McCarthy family has a commitment to the free press because the McCarthy family was connected with the Salt Lake Tribune for years and years and years. Okay. All right, Jessie, you want to talk about geoinquiry?
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to share some resources that teachers and I developed over the course of last year in conjunction with a grant opportunity we got from National Geographic. And in short, what happened was I invited Chris Hines with National Geographic to come out and do a professional development for our teachers in August of last year. He did a 3-hour professional development. And he talked about the educator certification program, as well as the National Geographic geoinquiry process as a way to help reinforce literacy skills, bring some rigor to instruction and to learning, and to obviously help students learn geography skills, which is my love. And it was great, it was fantastic. And then one of the teachers raised her hand, fantastic teacher, and she's like, you know, they showed really great videos of teachers across the country doing these geo-inquiry processes with their students, where they're student-driven inquiry processes, and students are investigating a community issue. They do the data, they do the research, they compile the data, they analyze the data, they create a compelling story, and then they act by sharing their compelling story about the community issue that they wanted to investigate with a specific target audience. Community members, policymakers, whomever they determine. And then the teacher raised her hand and said, this looks great, I want to be that teacher, but how? Right, because it's, you know, we all have our realities that we deal with. And so that made me think, well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to, if we get teachers buy-in, then how do we support them in doing what they want to do? And so I applied for a grant to National Geographic. We got a little bit of funding, and I was able to support a cohort of teachers to develop and implement geo-inquiry processes in their classroom. And as a result of that, we discovered some, you know, we were all kind of building the plane as it was flying. So none of us knew exactly what this was going to look like or how it was going to shake out. And so what we ultimately ended up with was a cohort of teachers who pulled together their geo-inquiry processes. We also developed some mini geography modules designed for the K-12 teacher who's not a geography teacher, to show teachers how you can use geography thinking and geography concepts integrated in whatever concept or whatever content area you teach, and within whatever grade level. And so to start with that, we pulled together, there's three sets of modules. The first section of modules are the geography modules, and they're just these little mini PowerPoints that provide background information to teachers about what geography really means today. It's more than just memorizing the maps and that kind of thing. So what does it really mean to help students develop geographic thinking, and how can they embed it within their content area? And so in the blue chart, you see the different topics, the different little mini modules of the geography sort of background knowledge. Within each of those PowerPoints, there are links to really great resources. We've highlighted vocabulary, academic vocabulary that students would need to know and that teachers can continue to use. The PowerPoints are also developed in a way that a teacher might choose to make some minor adjustments to them and then just use them within their instruction to help students develop those geographic thinking. Of course, the lower elementary grades probably need to do a little bit more adjustment.
What are most students, what level?
Or
All different levels. So, what level students?
It's developed for K-12. So the geography modules are designed to provide teachers background information, but they're designed in a way that a teacher could adjust them to use as a developmentally appropriate for their grade level that they're using. Help teachers, history teachers who are not exactly sure how to use geography within history instruction. How do you really develop the geographic thinking within, while studying history and all that kind of stuff, what that means. So that's the first section of geography modules. And then the second section is just sort of how we supported the cohort in implementing their geo-inquiry project. They get some fantastic resources. You can see evidence of what they did, in there, so I'm not going to take your time today to show those to you. And then the third section of modules are the actual geo-inquiry projects that the teachers did. And one of the things that they provided was an overview of their process. That a teacher, they find themselves using the geo-inquiry process with their students. It gives them some ahas and ways to think about how you can do the geo-inquiry project in a way that works for you. So each of our team of teachers integrated the geo-inquiry process in a different way. Some of them developed their own geo-inquiry questions for their students, and others had their students develop the geo-inquiry questions themselves. Others had different teams of students develop a different geo-inquiry question each. So they did whatever worked for them, and they integrated it in a way that they were comfortable with as their first. And then, of course, this year they're all going to be doing it again, hindsight goes 2020, and so they give them some ideas to think about. The trickiest thing about supporting teachers in doing the geo-inquiry process is that teachers needed to really trust the process. They needed to trust that student-driven inquiry is a big unknown, but it's okay, right? Because as teachers, we're planners, and we know what's going to happen, every step of the way. And so that was kind of a big aha for all of us. So anyway, this resource, there's a link for it. I just wanted to share that with you. I'm actually going to apply to piggyback off of the National Geographic proposal for UCSS, so we can get more into it, talk more about it at UCSS. But just a really great resource to share with teachers who might need a little, more explicit understanding of what geography is and what it might look like. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessie. And the Nat Geo kind of advisory council that supports this kind of work, Chris Hines will be, is he going to present at the conference, or do we know what's going to happen there?
I don't know. Well, we've had some people apply to do it, but it wasn't Chris.
Okay.
So,
all right. Great. That's great. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool to see. It's very similar in some ways. The geo-inquiry process work is very similar to what you did with Generation Citizen in terms of kids generating questions, and it's really, really cool.
It's certainly Action Civics oriented process, and I did want to emphasize it's a process that can be done in any content area, whether it's science, language arts, any process, any content area can really do that. So there's links within the modules, the Section 2 modules, that will take teachers to the National Geographic resources to help them learn more about that. But yeah, definitely an Action Civics oriented process, so really great.
Yep. All right. I'm going to talk about Adobe, and then I'm going to let my friend Naomi talk about Better Days. So it's cool. Who here knows about this grant? You know a little bit about it, Scott. Can you remind me the Adobe link, or what's the name of it?
I don't know what it is right off the hand. I just know that, they just provided all the Creative Suite programs from Adobe available to teachers and students.
All right. Adobe Creative Cloud.
Different tiers, though, for elementary and secondary.
Right. There's the possibilities for what you have. It's bless you. It's pretty amazing. Here are just a links to some of the things that kids can do. Right. So Premiere Pro. So we got video editing and film editing capabilities. Adobe Audition. Character Animator. Adobe Spark is what the elementary kids will have in terms of creating really amazing visual stories. There's Adobe Photoshop. This is all stuff that you have access to as an educator, and you can have access to it on your home computer as well. So you can even do family reunion flyers if you want at home. It doesn't, this is you have a license to this. And I'm not an expert at all. I don't know at all how teachers would use this, except that teachers could definitely do amazing and give opportunities for students to have amazing opportunities to create very interesting, creative responses to a historical question, or creating their own documentaries. There are awesome online resources, like little online classes you can sign up for that will take you through how to help students create 60-second documentaries. And here's the process, and here are the tools, and so go, And all I'm saying is that a lot of your students in the state are going to be learning about these tools in their computer classes, and so they're going to have that skill set that may be even beyond what the teacher has, but that doesn't mean the teacher can't say, hey, if you want to respond to this question using the tools you have, go for it, right? So that's the only reason I'm bringing this up is because it's out there as an availability, and if we don't educate our teachers about the possibilities, then it's just going to be squandered resources. So my question to you is, I mean, we could have somebody who knows a lot more about this do a presentation at a social studies leadership meeting if you want to see some of the possibilities. I mean, at the next meeting, we could just say, here's 15 minutes to kind of give you examples. Would that be useful, or? Pam says, don't do it at the next one because she can't be here, but it just seems like, it's like I told him, the guy, Aaron Waddell is the person here in the agency that's going to be working with us right now, and I said, you know, people have to see it to be it, but the possibilities for creativity and for everything from Utah History Day, filmmaking documentaries, using these tools to, you know, kids creating incredible art or a photo montage as a response to a reading they did about Topaz, who knows? I mean, the possibilities are really endless, okay? It's just that I know social studies teachers are not Adobe Photoshop teachers, right? But if they are aware of the program and the capabilities, then they can set their kids free to do the fun stuff, okay? So we will try to get somebody from Adobe, but it's a major investment from the state in terms of buying into this suite of resources that are available for kids and for teachers to use. Okay. All right. Shall we talk about better days? Come on up, Naomi.
Let's talk about better days.
So this is Naomi Watkins, who's the Director of Education at Better Days 2020. And if you want to sit here, I can pop up.
Or can I just stand?
You can stand, but I've got sound here for people.
Oh, I'll just hold this then.
Perfect.
I don't want to sit down. And I have a cold, so I'm sorry. It's like, why? The cold already, it's not fair. So, hi, welcome to Talking About Better Days 2020. And I know a lot of you have heard me talk about this before, but we are now in the march towards the women's suffrage anniversaries in 2020, and they're going to come quickly. So my short little spiel, if you haven't heard this before, is that in the year 2020, we are celebrating two major anniversaries around women's suffrage. One is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, and actually the 100th anniversary of Utah ratifying is coming up on October 3rd of 2019, so that's just in a few weeks. But the national celebration will be on August 26th. So Women's Equality Day, which just happened, that is the anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. So lots of things are happening nationally about that anniversary. Right now in Washington, D.C., museums have all kinds of really great exhibits, and a lot of that stuff is online, too, that you can use. But in February of 2020, it will be the 150th anniversary of Utah women voting. And a lot of people don't know. I mean, you're history people, so I'm assuming you know this, but Utah women were voting 50 years before the ratification of the amendment, and a lot of people have no idea. And that story is complicated and I think fascinating. And so Better Days 2020 has been leading the charge for these celebrations. So a couple of things that have already happened and some new things that are in the works. There's a full curriculum on utahwomenshistory.org about the history with tons of primary source documents and, I don't know, tons of activities and videos, and we're still adding to it. I'm actually meeting with the historian this week to talk about what else we want to make sure that's there. But soon there will be a virtual tour of downtown Salt Lake City where you can see the different suffrage sites. So that's coming. It already exists as a PDF that you could, if you were taking kids to the Capitol to tour the Capitol, you could then add on some additional sites, because I know sometimes people are looking for an additional thing to do if they come all the way downtown. The other exciting thing is we've been doing illustrations of Utah women's advocates, and we finished the 50 that we had set out to do. which is a huge accomplishment, to have one illustrator illustrate 50 women and to do all the research on those women. The originals are actually touring the state right now. They are up on display at the Salt Lake Community College campus on State Street, and they will be there through the end of September. So you're welcome to go visit that. The hours are actually really generous. They're Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 p.m., which I was like, my gosh, you could go at 9 after your kids are asleep or something. But it will be touring the state. So it's going as far south as Springdale, which is just outside Zion National Park, as far north as Logan. And so that will be touring in different places through. I'll email it to Robert and he can send it out to you because I have the dates and everything. But it's really cool to see in person. So it just opened on August 20th at Slick. It was the first time I'd ever seen all 50 women in the same space. So, a lot of our iconography. Oh, there's 2 men. I should say 48 women and the 2 token men in the set. But I mean, as being a woman and being in a space where all the iconography is majority women is a different experience than what I have normally experienced as a woman in the public spaces. So it's really cool to see. And then the first 25 illustrations just came out in this book, published by Gibbs Smith. And actually, I'm going to give away a book today. So if you're interested, can you just write your name on a Post-it and fold it? And I don't have a, sorry for those of you who are not here. You should be here just for this. But get a hat. So this is really exciting that this is the first ever book about Utah people marketed to kids. The book retails for $16.99 online. Yeah. So, and I can pass this around before we give it away. But so I and Catherine wrote the book, and we worked very closely with family descendants and different scholars to do the research. So at the opening of Brooks Illustrations, we invited family descendants to come to see the exhibit. It was really cool to have them be there and to share their relatives and family, ancestors with us. So really a special thing. So that is really exciting. I'll pass that around. The other thing is the 50. Some of you have gotten these sets of trading cards from me before, and if you haven't, these are some leftovers, so you're welcome to take another set. Or a new set, I should say. But the 50 are being turned into trading cards. They're actually at the printer right now. And those will be available for purchase. So one thing that I think that I got my team to agree upon is that if you are a teacher, if you use the code TEACHER25, all caps, you get 25% off, unlimited, to the store. So the store is at betterdays2020.com/shop. But you can get whatever you want for 25% off, unlimited, et cetera, et cetera. So share that discount code because we want to make sure that we're getting this, we're covering our own costs for the production, but that teachers are getting this into their hands and being able to use it. It's betterdays2020.com and then /shop. I'll send it out to Robert. But if you go to the betterdays2020.com website, there's a link to the shop, and then you can just input that code. The cards, the box of 50 should be available in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So just know that that's coming. And this is the shop. There's free downloads. You can actually download the illustrations and print them into larger posters if that's of interest to you. And we'll be adding some things as we get closer to the anniversaries. I'm pushing for some cool T-shirts and things like that too. The other thing coming up, if you're in the Salt Lake Valley area, September 20th, mark this on your calendar, September 20th, at the Salt Lake Library Square, where the city and county building and all of that plaza area by the Leonardo, we're having what they're calling a radification celebration with a D, radification. So a celebration in honor of that 100th anniversary of Utah ratifying the amendment. So that will be Friday, September 20th from 6 to 9 p.m. It's free. There will be a lot of different things happening during that 3-hour period, so you are welcome to join us for that. September 20th, Friday, September 20th. I'll add that to my email too. And, and the other thing, we are offering free training, professional learning opportunities for teachers. We already went to Salt Lake City School District with Desi and her teachers.
I need to share this because I shared it with you. During the PD, a teacher texted me and said, this women's suffrage PD right now is amazing. So I thought that was
thank you.
excellent. The teachers really, really loved it.
And we're coming to Canyons, and we're coming to Alpine, and so we'd love to come to your district. And that is as simple as emailing me and us finding a date that mutually works. And we're flexible as far as length of time. We can make it work for your schedules because I know every district has different schedules and requirements, and so we would like to make that happen.
And you may not know this, but I put some money away in the budget to help pay for subs.
So that's good news. That makes me happy to hear, too.
I don't have confirmation yet on whether that's been approved, but I made that request. So if what is holding you up is you don't have money to pay for teachers to attend the PD because of sub costs, then you need to talk to me about arranging this.
And I'm passing my card around, so you can just email me directly and we can just set it up. The other thing to be looking for soon is we're working on school kits, meaning that schools can decide to become our partners, and that means that we give the schools free stuff, like swag, like sashes, and, everyone wants a sash, a suffrage sash. Right? Buttons and all that kind of stuff, books. We're hoping to give away some of the books, too, to schools so that they're in their libraries, because schools should have that book about Utah people in their library. And then we are working towards an event in February to celebrate that anniversary. So the anniversary is on Valentine's Day, so it would be sometime between the 12th, 13th, and 14th. We're trying to work on that. But we are definitely focusing on involving school kids, centering it around kids, so it's not just some boring speech from the governor. Can I say it?
This is being recorded.
Yeah, a really great speech from the governor. But we want it to be something that's fun and celebratory and that involves kids. So we'll be having information about that. So in thinking about scheduling professional development, we want to try to get it before that February anniversary so the kids are prepped and ready for that to happen. So what else? I don't know. What questions do you have? Or none? Are we ready for this drawing? Okay.
Also very connected. The cool thing about the whole idea about 2020, Better Days 2020, is also the connection to there's going to be a general election coming up in November of 2020. So it's all about women also as leaders in politics and encouraging that piece as well. So it's not just like, oh, here's this antique moment when people got the right to vote. It's also like, what do you do with that? So that's going to be a nice part of this as well.
Well, and we're hoping, because it is an election year, we're trying to work with the elections office to make it so there's like a statewide contest where kids submit get out to vote materials. So like the button or the poster or the PSA that's on the radio. Like, how cool would that be? And to use the suffrage movement as like the muse for that, right? Because they were using the same tactics that we obviously still use today in social movements, and also to get people out to do things. The Now Playing Utah website, are you guys familiar with that? Well, Now Playing Utah is a website that is now run by the Utah Cultural Alliance. And they're kind of the hub for all the events that are happening in the state. So this is a really good place to look not just for Better Days 2020 type events, but also just events of interest, like what's happening in your neighborhood that weekend, like you're looking for something to do. So there will be events happening about women's suffrage throughout the state. So like Utah State University just had a kickoff. They're devoting the entire school year, calling it the Year of the Woman. And they're doing all kinds of events. Like there's a political cartoon exhibit that's up there right now at USU's library. We're working with the UMFA to do an Acme Lab exhibit that will run from March through November of next year that looks at Utah women activism and the different strategies they use to promote people and visitors to get more civically involved. And the other thing is, on the 4th floor of the Capitol, we will have an exhibit by Better Days 2020 on that 4th floor, all of 2020, so kids can come and see. It won't be the original illustrations, but the large illustrations and other things, different artifacts of these different suffragists that will be there. So that will be a really great thing. But yes, lots of things will be happening next year. And Martha Cannon's statue is going to Washington next year. We've talked about this before. And the hope is that the statue, or at least a model of the statue, because some people are a little bit nervous of the actual statue traveling around the state before it goes to DC, but the idea being that that all Utahns would be able to see the statue before it heads to Washington, DC, since not everyone has the opportunity to go to National Statuary Hall to see what's there. So lots of cool stuff. It's exciting.
Great.
So thanks for having me. Oh, let's do this drawing.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I'll just hold them. You get to pick.
No, you can.
No.
Oh. Drum roll, please.
Jesse.
Oh, you're kidding. I never win anything.
You won today.
Hey. So we have consolation prizes for everyone. We have we did a Holocaust education workshop over the summer, and from Facing History ourselves, and we ordered these books, and they arrived. A bunch of books arrived just damaged, and so they sent another set of books for us. So we have plenty to share, and these are amazing resources on Holocaust education from Facing History ourselves, and you are free to take one if you feel like you have folks in your district who would use it, or take two if there's still some left over. So you've got consolation prizes as well. All right, thanks, Amy. I don't think people realize what when you think about like Wendy Rexapsit, Wendy's like, in Korea, I know the story a lot, but in Korea, you'll see a marker in front of some historic monument, and it will say, basically like State Monument number 12, and it will, they kind of, almost in a hierarchy, they've listed the monuments around Korea that are absolutely, people need to know this is important, and I think of Wendy as she's a state asset. She is a state asset. And Naomi is also an incredible asset for Utah students. Your devotion to this project has just been outstanding. So I think you should give her a round of applause. She's amazing. And when was the last time I saw you? Was it Madrid or was it? Yeah, sorry. We ran into each other in Madrid, but yeah.
Like one does.
Yeah, it's like one does, right. So we made a joke about that, so. So awesome. So thank you very much. Okay, so we talked about History 1700 and the online courses and the essay contest and the geo inquiry and the Adobe resources. All right, we have a census occurring. Anybody doing anything census related, education related, regarding the Census 2020 coming up? I mean, there are two challenges here. One is trying to figure out how to, there are a lot of lessons and things out there. Statistics in schools is their really catchy name for the census materials they've developed. But it's also really critical for schools to take the lead in making sure that all kids are counted so that we don't have an undercount of and all the resources that are then affiliated with the census. So if I get more information about it, or if you have people who are really interested in teaching more about it, please let me know. I've got census materials that are available, classroom materials that could be used out in schools. There are huge implications for policy that a U.S. government citizenship teacher could use. There are whole giant maps lessons you could probably teach about the census. It's just a matter of, like, where do you find the time when you're covering U.S. history or U.S. government but it's a very timely issue, okay? All right, let's talk about civics in this last little bit. There used to be a required report that school districts would make to the Commission on Civic and Character Education regarding your efforts in terms of promoting civic education. You are no longer required to make that report. The reason you are no longer required to make that report is because there's no longer a Commission on Civic and Character Education in the Lieutenant Governor's office. You can't make a report to a non-existent commission. The funding that went to the Commission on Civic and Character Education now has been allocated and goes to into Wendy's area, not into state history per se, but into the Department of Arts and Museums. And within that, either division or department, I always forget which is which, there's an allocation there so we can continue the civic work like supporting We the People and all the other projects, but you won't be reporting to that. I still have to have some kind of report provided to the state board and then to the legislature on what's going on regarding civics and civic education in your district. So I will be sending you a Google form that you will fill out that can give me some stories and some information about the efforts you're making to continue civic and character education, all right? The question really is, how do you measure it? How do you measure engagement? And how do you get a sense of the kinds of things that are going on? And I think, for example, Desi, you've got some really great stories now from the Action Civics work that you've been doing at Generation Citizen. So if we were talking about how do you measure civic engagement, how do you know whether kids are really rising to that expectation of civic engagement and civic skills that we want and that we talk about in our standards? How do you know? What are some of the ways what are some of the metrics you're going to use? Right? Yeah, there's going to have to be a lot of qualitative stuff about, what people have been doing. Here's the problem. I mean, and this is something that, Elaine, I want you to think about it. I know you have to leave, but I just want you to think.
I just have to lead another meeting
Yeah.
at my district
Yeah.
in that one.
No, that's fine.
So,
You're not being scolded for leaving, right? But I do want to thank you for all the work you do in Alpine, and I want you to think about this issue of the responsibilities that may fall on your shoulders in terms of not only trying to figure this out, but also if we have this alternative way of gauging student engagement, civic engagement, and it's like the Civic Seal of Excellence, which is an example is in California, then what might that look like, and how are you going to manage that data, and how are you going to report that kind of stuff? Okay, so that's what I want you to be thinking about, because I can tell you that even the people who helped write the civics assessment bill now look at it as a real hoop that kids have to pass, and that many of them wait until the last few months before they're going to graduate and just do the least amount of work, because you can do the alternative assessment is 10 questions asked orally, right? That if you pass 6, you're good to go, and if you don't pass it, we're just going to keep asking you until you get those answers correct, right? I mean, because it was never intended to be an impediment to graduation. It was intended as a way to show that kids know their stuff, but it's still just, hoops. So so Representative Eliasson and Representative Waite, and there are others as well who are looking at other possibilities of legislation that will be different and a better assessment of what we mean when we say that kids are civically engaged. So the one possibility is this, the seal. I mean, I could probably just find it if I type in the California seal of. Let's see if that's it. So here's the state seal of civic engagement. What I'd love for you to kind of think about is whether this would be something that could be possible and workable as another option for Utah districts and it would be basically one of these things where you could do the civics test if you wanted to keep doing that. But if you wanted something else, possibly, you could go for this other option. So this is a state seal of civic engagement to deserving graduating high school seniors. That's the concept. It would be like on their diploma, or they'd get a sash. They could get a suffrage sash and a seal sash, right? Or they'd have another colored tassel, whatever. My question to you is, what's your gut reaction to that concept?
Anything's better than the assessment.
I would like to sit down with a small group and discuss some ideas that we have about this. I think some students that do Sterling Scholar and do Senate Youth would be great for this, and the other students are going to say it's just one more thing we need to do, although we could do this other. I just think it might be something we want to talk about over a longer period of time than just this.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I mean, we can certainly do that. We can even engage the legislators in coming to a meeting and having a conversation with people, with stakeholders, which would be a novel idea. I know that a bill file has been filed. There will be a bill in January that will try to address this. People want to have an alternative to the civics test.
Then let's talk with them before January.
Yeah, I have spoken with Representative Waite about this possibility to say, here's an option. The civics seal seems like a possibility. But I'm sure that they would be happy with having more conversations with people. What I'd like you to think about is so we have the link, the California Development, the state seal, they've created a kind of a rubric for what it should look like. I don't know where they are in terms of, because the devil's in the details, right? It's all about, okay, so we want this, but then what qualifies and what doesn't? You know, if you go to one zoning meeting and then write a report about it, is that equivalent to, and is that enough civic engagement? Well, depending on what the heck they were talking about, it might have been awesome. You know, you might have learned a lot about how the world works by going to that meeting. Or maybe they did there's a whole list of possibilities. We the People, Project Citizen, so there could be a lot of latitude, and it could be something where it's just very district decisions about what meets the requirements to qualify for the state seal. But then somebody's got to decide that, right? So some people somewhere have got to be making the decisions about, yes, you qualify for this, you don't, or if you didn't meet these requirements, here's the other option, is to take the civics test. You know, that's one of the issues we need to be thinking about. Desi, did you have a comment or?
Well, I was just wondering if the thinking was the seal of engagement, are they thinking about it being a requirement, but then you just said either that or perhaps an optional test or something.
Yeah, I think.
But either way, they're looking at maintaining a requirement for graduation. Is that right?
Right. I don't think there's any political will to get rid of the civics test, just to get rid of it. The idea is we know this isn't really what we want. It's not really rigorous enough. So how about an alternative? You can do this, which takes things up a notch. It's one or the other. I don't think, but who knows what will happen between now and the legislative session. I think it's a great opportunity to say civics is important and here's a better alternative, but I don't want to foist that on you guys if you're the ones who are out there going to have to figure out how to manage that, you know?
It sounds like it's kind of like the field by literacy where students can apply for this, students can, there are some parameters, so I think that there's lots.
Yeah, okay. Well, we will definitely keep talking about it. All right. I want to talk, go ahead.
Can you say again where that money is and is it available to apply for that came from the Civics Commission?
Yeah, so the Civic and Character Education Commission funding, those funds will be at the state. Is it a division or a department?
I don't remember, but it's Heritage and Arts.
It's Heritage and Arts, right? I don't believe they've kind of set the parameters yet for how they're going to make, like open up for requests and things like that. But if you remind me, I'll get you in touch with the right people. Because I know, Kay, you had the same question. Because, Kay, normally the Commission on Civic and Character Education helps support the UCSS conference every year. And so Kay needs to know who, and their basic response to you at that point was, we don't know yet, right? We don't know yet about how we're going to do this, but okay. But Desi Kay would also be a great person to talk to because she's got the email of the person there. Okay.
Do you know the name? Okay.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Okay. So I want to talk to you really quickly about Senate Youth and we'll be done. And then Brian has been pulling all of the stuff that goes along with the giant maps so we can disperse like the maps and some stuff to you, and then we can figure out, I'd rather just get it out there, and then we'll figure out the logistics of like more lessons and things like that as well. So United States Senate Youth is an awesome opportunity for two kids from each high school across Utah to compete in a morning competition, and if they win, they get $10,000 each, unrestricted scholarship, and they get a week in D.C. as the guest of the United States Senate. Pam, we've had about 35 people every year, right, as Senate Youth in the Senate Youth competition. We've had a lot of you have judged it. I want more possible candidates. So this year what we're going to do is we're going to put a simple Google form together that I can send the link out to you, and if I just get 2 names from a school, then we can do the follow-up with talking to those kids about the process. All right? So we're going to try something new. Who knows? We may end up with double the number of students. That's our goal. Then we're going to need people to help. So if you've never judged it or you've never been a part of it, it's a really cool day, and it's in November. I'll look at my calendar and see when it is, because I'd love to have you there. Yep.
My recommendation is bring 1 or 2 of your teachers that is thinking about doing that, pushing kids to that. They see what it is and they go back and they recruit students and have them next year.
It's November 15th this year, okay? November 15th in the morning up until about noon, and it's a really cool opportunity for students. They really enjoy it, and
what's our deadline for submitting stuff?
I don't know, because
A month prior to that?
about 3 weeks prior. So
we're almost on that.
So we're gonna get the word out. We'll get the word out to people to get their names in so they can get a portfolio of stuff put together. So usually the portfolio is due toward the end of October. So we'll get the word out. Okay? So it's an awesome opportunity. Okay. All right. Please notice that the vision of the USBE says all students are going to succeed and lead by having the knowledge and skills to learn, engage civically, and lead meaningful lives. So it's right there. There's no excuse for us to not be teaching it.
There's no mathematics.
Exactly, right? All right, thanks you guys. You guys are awesome. There's more stuff in the back for you. Lots of swag.